Any debate around policy, particularly one that's quite sensitive and widely used, like negative gearing, could see some disruption in confidence from investors. Clearly, anybody who's currently negative gearing, based on the Labor announcement of their policy, will be grandfathered. So that kind of alleviates, I suppose, some nervousness from existing investors. But those people who are looking into the marketplace and maybe considering purchasing later this year, being an election year and all, potentially it could be in the back of their mind that there will be some changes around negative gearing. Well, I think the most important thing is that the recent debate around negative gearing has really thrust the housing market back onto the policy agenda. It's been sorely lacking any real debate really since 2010. That was the last time we had a housing minister, which was Tanya Plibersek. So I think at the very least we'll see much more robust debate around issues like more tax policy relating to housing, but also affordability, land release strategies, charges on developers, and so forth. So that's the real positive around this debate. But of course, when we started talking about negative gearing being such a sensitive issue and affecting such an important and valuable asset class like housing, $6.5 trillion asset class, more than 52% of wealth of Australians held in housing. So it definitely needs to be very carefully considered. And the real risk here is the unknowns. If we did see Labor get elected and we saw those policies for negative gearing actually implemented, there's a lot of unknowns around how will that actually affect investor demand, which is currently just a little bit less than 50% of all new mortgage demand. Well, absolutely. So at the moment, when we look at investment in the Australian housing market, considering the yield profile of housing is so low, we're looking at gross yields in Melbourne, about 3%. In Sydney, it's a little bit higher than that, about 3.2%. When you start netting those very low gross yields out, you're probably looking at net yields that are in the low 2% mark across our two largest cities. So I think anybody who's investing at the moment largely and broadly will be using a negative gearing strategy at least over the first few years of their investment cycle. So when we start looking at investment behaviour, well, investors almost overwhelmingly target established properties. 93% of investment mortgages are for established homes. About 7% are for new homes. So if we're to see negative gearing move specifically and only to new housing, we need to see a really fundamental shift in investment behaviour, moving that 7% of investment activity to a much larger proportion, a much larger proportion for new housing. That's going to really change the overall investment profile.